In 1790, William Blake wrote, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite." Almost 200 years later, in 1954, Aldous Huxley published a book called The Doors of Perception. And in 1965, a band in Los Angeles shortened that quote even further and began playing shows as The Doors. My point here is to say, even if you think you're not familiar with the work of William Blake, you probably are, at least indirectly. William Blake is often seen as a visionary poet, which could be taken multiple ways. He often spoke of religious visions, but he also spoke about humanity, spirituality, and desire in ways that were, in hindsight, quite ahead of his time, metaphorically visionary. And while I agree he was ahead of his time, I think equally true, though unevenly acknowledged, is that William Blake was very much a product of his time. He lived through the Industrial Revolution, the American Revolution, and the French Revolution, and all of these historical events greatly impacted his artistic productions. And for any of you yet to take British literature or world history, I promise this is relevant. William Blake was born in November of 1757 in London, and he only attended school long enough to learn to read and write. As an adolescent, he was apprenticed with a printmaker, which opened up an entirely new artistic medium for him. According to Timothy Hilton, author of William Blake, A Life, Blake grew an appreciation for this craft and his own handiwork, and this was happening while the Industrial Revolution was taking wind throughout Europe. And Blake, a romantic, someone swept up by aesthetics and natural beauty, didn't see what the economists and the industrialists were celebrating. He simply saw the sewage from overcrowded cities, unsafe working conditions, and industrial sprawl tainting the natural beauty he revered. Blake often wrote of true wisdom, true holiness existing outside of human institutions. And examples in his poetry echoing this sentiment are not hard to find. No bird soars too high if he soars with his own wings. The fox condemns the trap, not himself. The tigers of wrath are wiser than the horses of instruction. He even referred to the industrial sprawl as dark satanic mills, as noted by Northrop Frye in A Fearful Symmetry, a study of William Blake. He often used religious symbolism and imagery in his work, both linguistic and visual. At this time in England, the Church of England controlled most of society and culture. William Blake considered himself deeply religious and spiritual, but he detested the dogma of the church. He was very critical of many human institutions, and arguably the most universal oppressive institution at the time was the English monarchy. Not only did the English crown dictate religious and cultural agendas where Blake lived, the British Empire did so globally, and English imperialism seemed invincible to many people until the American Revolution. And to a romantic British mind, watching American colonials defeat the British establishment would have been easy symbolism to digest. In a society dominated by organized religion, strict social codes of conduct, and nearly impenetrable barriers between socioeconomic classes, the notion that the establishment could be dismantled was eagerly accepted by many. Or, as Blake put it, what is now proved was once only imagined. And the American Revolution, at least in part, inspired the French Revolution of 1789, which was much closer to Blake geographically, but the spirit was very similar. The revolution seemed to be based on the idea that no, the average citizen is not expendable for the sake of some monarchic agenda. And in a line that summarized the sentiment of the rebellion well, from his seminal Marriage of Heaven and Hell, Blake said, "Expect poison from standing water." And he points out the issues with stagnancy, how humans are dynamic, changing beings, and suggesting that their institutions should be as well. The British establishment as a status quo was standing water, and the poison was the exploitation and control to which the British citizens were subject. We see these sentiments echoed throughout his artwork and his life. William Blake was a known nudist, often exemplifying his free-spirited philosophies by simply lounging in the garden with his wife, as noted in the Broadview Anthology of British Literature. So William Blake is one of the most emblematic artists of the Romantic period of British literature, and though he's often referred to as ahead of his time, he's also very much a direct product of his time. And once it becomes evident how historical context affected Blake as an author and an illustrator, this context can become a tool for analyzing his work. Thank you.